Imagine being 12 years old, clutching a small backpack, and watching your parents' car disappear into the distance while strangers stream past you at a train station. Not a word, not a warning, just laughter fading into the night. My name is Alexandra, and that was the day I learned my parents didn't see me as a daughter, just as a joke. 20 years later, their 29 missed calls told me everything I needed to know. Karma had finally come knocking. If you've ever dreamed of watching justice unfold against the people who hurt you most, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful revenge stories, and buckle up, because Alexandra's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about survival, healing, and the kind of revenge that hits where it hurts the most. The night my parents left me at a train station, I was 12 years old. Old enough to feel fear clawing at my chest, but young enough to still believe, for a moment, that they'd come back. It was dusk. The sky was streaked with fading orange, the overhead lamps buzzing with pale light. Travelers hurried past me, suitcases rolling, shoes clicking on the cracked concrete floor. But I stayed frozen on that cold metal bench, clutching my backpack so tightly the straps dug into my palms. Let's see how she finds her way home. That's what they said. They even laughed as they drove away. At first, I laughed too, nervously, like this was some weird family game. But as the minutes bled into an hour, my laughter turned into silence. The station grew emptier. The smell of roasted peanuts from a nearby stand faded into something sour, something heavy, fear. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried not to cry. My parents' cruelty didn't start that night. It had always been there, disguised as jokes. When I was 6, they locked me out on Halloween to see if I could find my way back. At 8, they forgot me at the grocery store for an hour. And each time, when I came home trembling, they'd roll their eyes. Lighten up, Alex. It's just a joke. That was their favorite phrase. A shield for their cruelty. So when they abandoned me at the train station, it wasn't out of character, it was the inevitable next step. As the station emptied, shame began to replace fear. Why me? Why did they enjoy seeing me suffer? At 12, I didn't have the words emotional abuse. I only had the ache of realizing my own parents took joy in my pain. A man in a gray coat noticed me. You lost, kid? My voice shook. My parents left me. He frowned, crouched to my level. Do you know a number to call? I nodded. My mom had drilled it into me, ironically, not out of care but because you get lost too easily. The man let me use his phone. My parents didn't answer. He tried again. Nothing. Finally, I gave him my grandmother's number. When she picked up, her voice was sharp, panicked. Within an hour, she arrived, eyes blazing, wool coat flapping in the wind. She pulled me into her arms so tightly my ribs ached. Where are they? She demanded. But I couldn't answer. I just buried my face in her chest. The next morning, my parents showed up at Grandma's. Not ashamed. Not guilty. Amused. Dad smirked. See? She survived. Mom added, we just wanted to teach her independence. Grandma's voice shook with fury. She's 12. Do you know what could have happened? But they brushed it off. Called me dramatic. Sensitive. Overreacting. To them, it was over. But for me? Something inside me cracked. I stopped trusting. Stopped laughing at their jokes. I became quiet, withdrawn. At school, while other kids cheered at football games and danced at homecoming, I hid in the library. I studied people. Their expressions, their tone, the way cruelty hides behind smiles. Teachers called me mature for my age. But I wasn't mature, I was wounded. At home, the mockery never stopped. When I cried, they told me to toughen up. When I earned top grades, they sneered, book smarts won't help you in the real world. Every insult became fuel. At 17, I applied for scholarships like my life depended on it. Because it did. I got a full ride to a state university. And the day I left, I didn't hug them. Didn't look back. I walked out with a duffel bag and a vow, never again. At university, I studied psychology, not just to earn a degree, but to dissect my pain. To understand why people like my parents existed. To build armor out of knowledge. I spent nights devouring research on trauma, resilience, and survival. I sharpened my pain into purpose. By 28, I had my PhD and my own practice. My waiting list stretched months. People walked into my office broken and left stronger. Each time, I felt like I was giving someone else the love I never got. That became my revenge, turning their cruelty into my power. For 20 years, I heard nothing from them. No birthdays, no holidays, no how are you? Nothing. And that silence? It was freedom. Until one night, my phone lit up. 29 missed calls. All from the same number. I stared at the glowing screen, my stomach sinking. Because I knew, deep down, what it meant. The past had finally come back to find me. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 29 missed calls. Then 3 more. Then 5. Same number, over and over. I almost didn't answer. My chest felt tight, like I was 12 again, back at that train station. My thumb hovered above the screen, torn between curiosity and dread. Finally, I swiped. Alexandra? My mother's voice cracked. Thank God. Please, you have to help us. I froze. Her tone wasn't mocking, wasn't cold. It was desperate. Behind her, I heard my father's voice, weak, coughing. Tell her we'll die if she doesn't come. My blood went cold. In fragmented sentences, they explained, my father had fallen ill. Medical bills were crushing them. They'd lost their home, their savings. Their friends had turned away. The only person left was me. My mother whispered, we know we weren't the best parents, but you're all we have. You're successful, aren't you? A psychologist? You can help us. Help them. The words burned. 20 years of silence, of absence, of knowing they chose not to care, and now they were calling me because they needed something. I didn't answer right away. Instead, my mind spun with images. Me at 12, abandoned on that cold bench. Me at 16, crying into my pillow while they mocked me for being too dramatic. Me at 17, walking out their front door with no hug goodbye. And now, after decades, they were clawing their way back into my life, because they wanted money. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the sheer audacity. Finally, I said it. Calm. Sharp. Every syllable like a blade. Now you know how it feels. Silence. My mother stammered, what do you mean? You left me once, remember? At a train station. At 12 years old. Alone. Terrified. And you laughed. You told me it was a joke. You told me to toughen up. We didn't mean, she sputtered. But I cut her off. So now it's your turn to toughen up. Figure it out. Isn't that what you always told me? For the first time in my life, I heard fear in their voices. Not anger. Not cruelty. Fear. Alexandra, please. But I didn't let them finish. I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening, but it wasn't empty. It was powerful. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the powerless child on a cold train station bench. I was the one who walked away. And that was only the beginning of their reckoning. The first hang-up should have been enough. But their desperation didn't end. Within days, voicemails flooded my phone. My mother sobbing. My father wheezing in the background. Begging, pleading. Alexandra, you don't understand. We have nowhere to go. You're all we have left. Please, please don't abandon us. That word, abandon, was like gasoline on old flames. Because suddenly I realized, they weren't just asking for help. They were asking for forgiveness. They wanted me to erase 2 decades of silence with a single check. And that's when I decided, if they were going to come back into my life, it would be on my terms. I didn't scream. Didn't rage. I didn't need to. My revenge wouldn't be loud, it would be clinical, precise. I started by meeting them once. At a small cafe near the hospital where my father was being treated. When I walked in, I barely recognized them. My father, once broad-shouldered and intimidating, looked frail, hunched, his skin sallow. My mother's hair was streaked with gray, her face worn with stress. They looked powerless. And that, for the first time, made me feel powerful. "Alexandra," my mother whispered, her eyes welling up. "You came." I sat across from them, my expression unreadable. "Yes. I came. But not for the reasons you think." They launched into their story again, how the bills were impossible, how no one else would help, how I was their only chance. My father's voice cracked. "We know we made mistakes. But we're still your parents." I leaned forward, letting the silence stretch before I spoke. "You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Choices that left a 12-year-old girl stranded at a train station, crying until a stranger took pity on her. Choices that told me again and again I wasn't worth love, only laughter." My mother shook her head, hands trembling. "We were trying to teach you strength." I smirked. "You did. Just not in the way you think. You taught me how to survive without you. And you taught me something else." They leaned in, hope flickering in their eyes. "You taught me how to walk away." I stood, dropping a $20 bill on the table to cover my coffee. Their voices followed me as I walked out, pleading, desperate, cracking with fear. For once, they were the ones left behind. As I pushed the cafe door open and stepped into the cool air, I felt something shift. The child who once sat alone at a train station was gone. In her place stood a woman who had taken back her power. And this time I wouldn't be waiting on a bench, hoping for them to return. I was the one leaving. I didn't block their number right away. Part of me wanted to see how far desperation could push them. The messages grew darker, less polished. My mother's voice cracked with panic, my father's coughed words thinner every day. They promised me things they had never given me as a child: love, attention, respect. But I knew the truth. They weren't reaching out because they finally saw me. They were reaching out because they had no one else. That was the part that stung them most. Not my rejection, but their isolation. For the first time, they were alone, truly alone, just like I had been all those years ago. When the hospital contacted me, the nurse explained they had listed me as their emergency contact. I almost laughed. They hadn't been there for one emergency of mine, not one scraped knee, not one birthday, not one tear at night when I needed comfort. And now, in their crisis, they wanted me to carry them. I told the nurse politely, "Remove me from the file. I'm not their contact. I'm just their child on paper." And then I hung up. Days passed, then weeks. My phone went from vibrating every hour to falling silent. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean abandonment. It meant freedom. I knew they were struggling, I knew their world was collapsing around them, and I knew there was nothing I needed to do. The girl they had left at the train station would have begged for scraps of their attention. The woman I had become didn't even flinch at the sound of their names. One evening, I passed the very same train station where it all began. I stood there for a long time, watching people come and go, luggage wheels clattering, voices echoing across the platform. It looked almost identical, same cracked tiles, same buzzing lights, same chill in the air. But the difference was me. I wasn't the child left behind anymore. I was the one who had chosen to leave them behind. I whispered under my breath, almost like a prayer, "Now you know how it feels." I never returned their calls again. I never visited the hospital, never offered a dime, never stepped back into the role of the daughter they thought they could reclaim. And the sweetest part of it all was that I didn't need to scream or seek revenge through fire and fury. I only had to give them the very thing they had given me. Absence. Indifference. Silence. And as I walked away from that train station for the last time, I realized the revenge wasn't about punishing them. It was about finally closing the circle. They had left me once. Now, I had left them forever. Years later, people sometimes ask me if I regret it. If I regret not running to the hospital, not giving them money, not answering those 29 calls. And I always answer the same way, no. Because regret is for people who had a choice. They made their choice the day they left a 12-year-old girl at a train station and laughed as she cried. They made their choice every time they told me to lighten up, every time they twisted cruelty into comedy. My revenge wasn't about revenge at all, it was about balance. About finally putting the weight back where it belonged. I built a life out of the rubble they left me in. I became the person I needed when I was young, not because they guided me but because they abandoned me. Every patient I sit with, every story of pain I hear, I know exactly what they feel. And when I help them rebuild, piece by piece, it feels like I'm rewriting my own history. That's something my parents will never take away from me. Sometimes I wonder if they thought about me in their final days. If they sat in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, and realized what they had done. If they finally understood that the greatest punishment isn't anger or revenge, it's irrelevance. To know that the person you threw away grew strong enough not just to survive without you, but to thrive without you. To know that you don't even have the power to hurt them anymore. That's the truest justice of all. And when I think back to that girl on the train station bench, hugging her knees in the dark, I want to tell her something. I want to tell her, you'll be okay. You'll hurt, and you'll cry, and you'll think you're alone forever, but you'll build something they can't touch. You'll rise from this, stronger than they ever imagined. And one day, they'll come crawling back, and you'll realize, you don't need them anymore. That is my story. The story of a little girl who was abandoned as a joke, and the woman who turned that joke into power. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, left behind, remember this. Your worth doesn't come from the people who failed you. It comes from what you choose to do after. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't screaming or fighting back. It's walking away, standing tall, and never turning around. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is the sweetest revenge. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate payback. Because as you've just seen, sometimes karma doesn't come knocking. Sometimes you become karma.